Peace, y'all. Good morning. Uh, if any of you read my post this morning, you see that I woke up a little bit uh perturbed, or a little bit sad this morning, just thinking about the state of our political affairs in this country. And some people, they'll just kind of look at it and say, "Oh, why are you so wrapped up in this stuff?" And my question is, why aren't you wrapped up in this stuff? Because I don't think we realize the gravity of what's happening and how it's going to affect us in the near future. I was gonna say, you know, in the long run, but I think we've kind of blown past that, and we're talking about imminent problems coming. So I just wanted to ask a question to most of you guys out there, whoever's listening, because this is something that I've been struggling with and I've been thinking about. Well, I don't know, no, I haven't really been struggling with it, but it's something that I've been thinking about for a while now. First of all, my question to you is, how many of you out there feel politically homeless? I mean, you know, Democrat, Republican, Independent, Libertarian, uh, Working Family, Green Party, whatever it is. But how many of you out there today feel politically homeless, where you don't see any type of party, any political party that represents the majority of your ideals, or the ones that you thought at one time did share your ideals? They're just the total opposite of what they used to be. Listen, I graduated high school in 1990, and I think somewhere around that time, maybe I think the year before I graduated, was when there was a Supreme Court decision that basically, and one of the Supreme Court justices was Scalia, who actually graduated from my high school. Antonin Scalia, he graduated from my high school, Xavier High School in New York City. And I remember the decision that came down that basically gave Americans the right to, under the protections of free speech, that they could burn the American flag. Now, some see it as anti-American, some see it as symbolic of protest and opposition, dissent, but it protected our rights. And I remember Democrats celebrated that. I remember Democrats being the party that celebrated and fought for uh, free speech. I remember Democrats being the party that was anti war. I remember the Democratic Party being the party that was so much about protecting our civil liberties um, from this government, and the Republican Party representing much of the authoritarian, elitist type of corporate watchdog type of politics. But as time has gone on, I mean, if we look today, all of the things that, many of the things that I've typically understood as being liberal, so to speak, because I mean, I've been a lifelong Democrat, but all of these things that I've typically understood as to be Democratic Party values, I'm now seeing these things being championed on the right. And, I couldn't fathom, in the 90s, in the early 2000s, please, maybe not even, 10 years ago, I couldn't fathom the Democratic Party being the party to champion censorship. The party that is championing authoritarianism and, and stripping autonomy away from people, stripping away their body autonomy. So, you know, we're witnessing a political shift, an ideological political shift that we did see previously in the 60s. I think it was maybe the late 50s, 60s, where, the Republican Party probably was more so that party that represented freedom for the population. And, black people were mostly Republicans, you know? And so I don't know. I feel like we're seeing a shift. But the question is, for you guys that are out there who feel politically homeless, do you believe that there is hope in either of the two major political parties in this country? And what do we do from there? Because a lot of people, if you look, and historic Democrats, people who I know have historically been Democrat voters, I'm seeing a lot of them now switching to vote Republican. And while I do agree with a lot of the 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 ideas, a lot of the things that the Republican Party tends to be fighting for, I don't trust them. I don't trust them because I understand that they are, in actuality, a left and right wing to the same corrupt bird. I understand that they're a uniparty, that they are a war party, that they're pro corporation party, pro Wall Street party. So I think all of these differences that we're seeing in the fight between Democrats and Republicans, I think that's more about who who's holding the gun right now. I mean, as Republicans or the Republican Party is seeing some of their interests, their ideological interests not being fulfilled, obviously, and while they find themselves under attack, they see what's happening with Donald Trump, their darling who's being persecuted, politically persecuted. So I get it, right? But one thing I've realized, if you look at this entirety of the situation, you'll know that this has always been about the elite against the populace. And the people who have always faced the most significant pushback, the most significant bipartisan pushback, have always been populist candidates, people who represent the sentiment of the majority of the population in this country, the people who represent the moods and the passions of the public. Those people are swiftly and ferociously attacked by the elite, by the establishment, and they're taken down at all costs. And we saw that with Bernie Sanders. We saw how the entire political establishment, left and right, unified and formed Voltron in order to stop Bernie. Well, let me say the entire Democratic Party establishment, because the Republicans believed that Bernie was going to be easy to beat. But when you look at it, even they thought it'd be easy to beat because they dismissed him. There was a lot of hubris in that, but they would not in any way tolerate a Bernie Sanders president. So they just were like salivating to run against Bernie. But the overall, but the problem was, the Republicans, they had their own problem. They had their own Bernie in Trump. And I used to always say that Bernie Sanders and Trump represent the actual sentiments and passions of the United States populace. You have a populist candidate on the left and a populist candidate on the right. But in both of those candidates, you see people who do not represent the interests of the overall political establishment. Donald Trump more so does, but he's uncontrollable. They're unable to control him. So therefore, it's easier for Donald Trump to get into position and make moves that he may see as certain business moves. One, obviously, is going to be yes to enrich himself, but he also does things that create in his mind some form of economic prosperity and power. Because we all know Donald Trump always felt that he had something to prove. That's just the type of person he is. I remember that correspondence, that dinner where they were going in on Trump. And I know that was the night that he decided that he was going to run for president and prove everybody wrong. So we know there was a lot of ego in it. But but going back to the populist candidates, you know, we had so much hope in Bernie, and unfortunately, he turned out to sell out his whole entire movement and fall in line with the political establishment, and in order to preserve his access, his comfort. So we don't have any real, and it's not even, and I'm realizing this is no longer about progressive. It's not about conservative. It's about class. It's about insiders and outsiders. And we won't, we're so stuck in this fight of Republican against Democrat that we're not paying attention. And I go in on Democrats. Why? Because, like I said earlier, they're the ones holding the gun. You know, just because I criticize Democrats doesn't mean that I am a supporter of Republicans. We need to abandon this loyalty to party and start adopting loyalty to our values. We need to start voting and doing things to protect what we believe in. So therefore, it's policy. I never ever vote party. I vote policy. And if none of the interests of my community are represented by any of those candidates, I'm not voting. I'm not voting for them. You see, we have the right to vote, but we don't have the obligation to vote. But what we do have an obligation to do is to communicate with each other and be active and hold anyone who is in elected office accountable, whether they are part of your political party or not. Because guess what? They represent you. You are their constituents. I talked about how here in New York City, everybody got out in the streets and galvanized to go and harass that crazy woman, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Yes, I know she's a nut job. I know she's racist. I know she's all those terrible things. But I also know that she's right in her disapproval of what's happening to Donald Trump. We don't know how to agree with people that we don't like. And that's a serious problem because it protects the delusion of the American project. It keeps us encapsulated in this bubble of delusion, arrogance, hubris, and denialism. We just don't understand. It's like there's so many things outside of our purview, and I wonder if it's because maybe many of us we just don't travel. We know how the economy is, so it's pretty tough for anybody to get out of here. But you always see that people who travel more have a much better or more informed perspective of how the world works. And unfortunately, in the United States, we're so heavily propagandized that we don't even really seem to have an interest in understanding any other point of view outside of what is fed to us by our media, by Western media. And that's sad. There's a big world out there, and it's a big world that is looking at us right now with disdain. We have superpowers who are forming Voltron against the United States with a total anti-American sentiment to dump the U.S. dollar as the global currency. Do you know what that means? Do you know? Listen, do we understand this? Do we understand that when we left the gold standard, when we detached from the gold standard, when Nixon took us off the gold standard in 1971, I think, we came up with an agreement with Saudi Arabia where all of their oil would be traded in the US dollar, meaning people had to buy the US dollar in order to purchase oil from Saudi Arabia. So that's how our fiat money has been protected. That's the petrodollar. So basically, the US petrodollar has been the dominant global currency for a very long time. But now Saudi Arabia just struck a deal with China. And they're like, and they freed themselves from this agreement with the United States. What do you think that means? The yuan is now the second most used currency to purchase oil now, and this is happening in swift, um, in a very swift manner. Like if you, I think like you have countries like Malaysia just announced that they're ditching the dollar. Kenya was like, you guys better get telling their country get rid of your dollar. Pretty soon, it's not going to be worth anything. We don't want to deal with the dollar. The BRICS nation, they're all coming together, like, and no one is paying attention. Do you know what? Listen, when the U.S. dollar is no longer the standard, the global currency, do you know how that will affect American citizens? Do you know how it is going to affect us when our money is worth nothing? When our money is devalued to the point where it barely means anything? Think about the rate of inflation that we're going to see. Think about going to the store and paying $20 for a dozen eggs. Think about, I was talking to someone about, the tariff wars that Trump started when he tried to bully China, right, under his administration. And yes, while it was a very dumb move, but I think it was also a move based in this false perception that the economy was stronger than it was. And I don't know if it was just incompetence by him and all of these previous administrations and all these people. And I don't understand, because the writing has been on the wall for so long. And it's scary right now. It's scary to see where we are, and that most of us are just so busy arguing over Donald Trump. And the thing with the Donald Trump thing is, see, I'm watching the collapse. Like everybody else is, they're cheering on this Trump prosecution, and everyone's laughing about, I see people actually laughing about the collapse of the U.S. dollar, as if you don't understand what that's going to mean for you and your kids. Like for me, it's crazy. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. We don't see what's coming. This is some scary, scary shit. So for me, I wish we would abandon, this addiction to drama and realize how the rest of the world sees us. You have the president of El Salvador. He put up a very poignant post, like, and I know I shared some of this stuff on my social media this morning, but if you read the things that are being said publicly about us all across the world, like I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of something that I read, something that I saw this morning from the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele. He says, think what you want about former President Trump and the reasons he's being indicted. But just imagine if this happened in any other country where a government arrested the main opposition candidate. The United States' ability to use quote unquote democracy as foreign policy is gone. He's 100% correct. Think about all the times Barack Obama and recently Kamala Harris, they're going to African nations, they're going all over the place preaching down their nose about values and democracy and what they should do. Come on, all of this, the American imperialist agenda with this interventionism going into all of these countries to quote unquote spread democracy by installing regimes, but by backing regime change and overthrowing governments. Like, bro, American hegemony is gone. It is gone. And most of us don't understand what that means for us. And it's because we're allowing all of these psychopaths in office to do whatever the hell they want at our expense, while we're busy arguing over the bullshit that they're feeding us, and we're not realizing this has nothing to do with values, to do with democracy, because we do not live in a democracy. Stop saying that. And it's so annoying for me to always see Democrats and people like, Hakeem Jeffries, who's right here from Brooklyn, New York. You know what I'm saying? The House Minority Leader. And it's so sad because to see what has happened, you know how many times I've talked to that brother and I'm just like, yo, what's going on? See, I think he's a good example of go along, get along. In order to preserve his access, his positioning, his power, he's just going to do whatever the establishment tells him to do. And it's so sad because when you come from New York, when you come from Brooklyn, you understand bullshit. You can't bullshit a bullshitter. And we see him running game. We see the game that most of y'all are out there running. And it breaks my heart to have to, call out these people. But they're people that I once looked up to or respected, in the political field here in New York City. And I'm so ashamed of them right now, watching them engage in these childish, petty political stunts while completely ignoring the rampant corruption that infests this city. Trying to preserve, relationships and access to certain individuals that win elections and get into power, without calling them out or holding them accountable in any way. You're abandoning your constituents. You're betraying the people that supported you and elected you into office. And sadly, you're so good at the pump fake. You're so good at the fast talk and the what's the word, like this playing on I hate this race card statement, but playing to race, that you fool everybody and you got people so emotionally wrapped up in shit that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme as they are descending into absolute poverty. So it's crazy to me. Y'all are not trailblazers. You're not people to look up to. You're cowards. It's one thing to try to get into the political process in order to affect change. And, a lot of people believe that you have to make compromises if you want to get anywhere, in politics. And I kind of understand that sentiment. But the moment you start to compromise your morals, your values, your integrity, you've already become disconnected from what it is that you've been fighting for. And that's all I see here in New York. And the crazy thing is, people talk all that, they got a lot of smoke for Florida. But I've been living on and off. I've been living back and forth between New York and Florida for damn near almost 30 years. And I can tell you that in Florida, it is a much better life. It is a much better life. And most of the things that you see when they talk about Florida, it's propaganda. And I get it. It's easy for us to fall for the clickbait headlines and, people say, oh, everything is racist and they're attacking black people and books and banning books and blah, blah. It's so sad because most of the things that you see in the media, especially in liberal media like CNN, well, it's all propaganda because Fox News they're full of shit too. But most of the things that you see on CNN, MSNBC, and those type of outlets that always go so hard against, Ron DeSantis and the Republicans and the southern states, most of that shit is bullshit. Because if you actually go to those places and you talk to the people, you'll see that you're being propagandized, you're being lied to. And I'm talking about black people. Black people down there are pretty damn happy. Listen, I think if more people were enlightened to the truth, a lot of people, I will say this, maybe we should ask ourselves, why are so many people migrating, leaving from these northern blue states and running their ass down to Texas, Florida, Georgia, all these places? Why? It's because you're being crippled financially, and not even just that. The values that we once held, we see that they no longer exist in the places that we used to love. I know that's what it is for me. But like I said, we're so disinterested in getting real information and doing our research and truly understanding what the root of the problem is that we're just letting things get worse and we're blowing past the point of no return, which is terrible for me. So the real question is, what is the solution? If you find yourself in a position where you feel like you are politically homeless, like so many of us do, what can we do? Well, I suggested years ago, and so many, we all did. We talked about forming the third parties, new political parties, and everybody always kind of talks about it, but then the immediate thing, oh, well, it's not going to work, oh, it'll take too long. But just imagine with Bernie Sanders, when he first ran and he galvanized the world and sparked that passion in so many people, before he sold us out. When he lost the first time, that was the perfect moment. That would have been the perfect moment for Bernie to run third party. I don't give a shit because we had no good options after that. It was Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. So I would have totally supported Bernie. And I think Bernie would have had such a massive wave of support that he probably could have even won that election because Bernie represented the majority of values of the country. However, we were convinced that he just can't win. That was the main going line for Bernie. It just can't be done. He can't win. He's going to be another Ron Paul. He cannot. Third party candidates can't win. Everything is unrealistic. Socialist, this. Bro, this is what they do. They hit you with buzzwords that most of y'all really don't even understand anyway. And, it's enough to scare the dumbed down American public. And it's sad. We have been under a constant dumbing down campaign for so long. And the actual interests, our interests have been ignored for so long that we believe that this is just the way that things are supposed to be now. That is 100% unequivocally false. And we have a responsibility to not accept it. So when I tell you that we're witnessing an illegal prosecution of Donald Trump, whereas these things the man was already impeached twice to no avail with bullshit, where the federal government had already investigated this so-called finance crimes and found no evidence of it, for it just to end up on a DA's desk who promised on his campaign trail that he was going to prosecute Trump for him to upgrade what is absolutely a misdemeanor and is already beyond the statute of limitations to a felony. 34 counts of the exact same charge against a former president of the United States. Meanwhile, he drops more than half of felonies to misdemeanors and has the city in carnage right now. It's like Gotham City out here. And then when you call it out and you talk about how it's Gotham City out here, you get attacked by white liberals who are telling you, oh, that's not true. What? Well, see, and that's another story because the majority of y'all, all y'all do is fight for drug use. You fight to facilitate drug use. And any type of racial justice, quote unquote, racial justice reform that you fight for, it's always based upon this criminalized view of Black people, but never an economic or educational one. There's a reason for that. Bro, we have some real problems. Like this is crazy. And, just the fact that we're here at this moment in history, it's like, what do you do when you care about the direction of the country, when you care about the future, when you care about the legacy that we leave behind for our children? Because I realize that no one is considering the children in any of these decisions. It's like they don't exist, which is why they're basically raising themselves. This is why we have runaway generations, because we have absconded from our responsibilities to them. But no one wants to talk about that because no one today understands the notion of accountability and responsibility to those that come after us. And it's a shame. And we already know the hypocrisy of the American project. We know how this country was founded. But even in all of that, if you are even one of those people who believes the in the ideology, if you believe in the sentiment and the ideals of the American institution or the Constitution, if you believe even in the sanctity of the office of president, I'm not talking about the evil people that sit in that office. I'm talking about if you even believe in the sacredness of the office of president, then I would even think that just to see this weird, uh, you know, uh, arresting of political opposition as an affront to the ideals that we try to represent to and profess to the world of what we call democracy or what represents this republic. I mean, let's be real. Even the mere impression of impropriety in this prosecution should have been enough for them to say, you know what, this just isn't worth it. Because rather than focusing on Donald Trump, maybe we should focus on the way that this presents the United States to the world, especially when you have this 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 American hegemonic perspective where you think that we're supposed to be the dominant uh, ideologues of the world, which is crazy. Now, all I know is what's going to happen from here. But I do know it's not good. It doesn't end up good. It doesn't end up in our favor. And the longer we continue to sit back and argue with each other and fail to hold these people accountable, not just Republicans, Democrats, when we decide that we're going to hold accountable the people who are holding the gun, then maybe we'll try to find our way back to safety. But until then, I'm just going to keep praying because it seems honest, like the honest to God truth, you know, is I don't, it's hard to, it's like I can't figure out a way through this. It's more of trying to figure a way out of this place. So it's just crazy that we're at a place where the only solutions that we can see as Americans to find peace and safety and security is by leaving this country. Black people should have been thinking about that long ago anyway. But anyway, yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit for now. And if you're one of those people that you listen to my little videos, or you participate on my page, and the only thing you can see is he's a Trump supporter, Trump defender, then this is not for you. Just kindly press the unfriend button, delete, block, whatever it is you got to do, because I realized last night I was engaging with some rando, some troll, and I realized that these people, they're really not interested in the truth. They're not interested in an authentic and sincere exchange of ideas. They just prefer to just, insult you and try to come up with weird, clever quips and hit you with non secular attacks and art. Like, it's just so weird. It's so weird, and it shows how so many of us really have no idea what we're talking about, but we like to give the impression that we do. And that's all a defense mechanism. It's protection, because If we knew what we were actually talking about, we wouldn't be afraid of engaging in conversation. Why? Because your thesis will do all the work for you. But unfortunately, most of us have no developed thesis or understanding of what we're talking about because we have taken our opinions from other people who have simply fed them to us without doing any research or gaining any sort of understanding. And that's the problem. We're so busy pretending to be smart that we're getting dumber. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Thanks for listening and peace.